Welcome to the first session of MidCamp day 3, technically. This is visual regression testing with BackstopJS. My name is David Needham. I'm a developer advocate at Pantheon. What that means is I sort of sit between the developers that are using Pantheon in the real world and the Pantheon developers that are building it and kind of reading new functionality and things like that. As part of this process, I end up creating a lot of demo sites. I end up creating a lot of training curriculum and interacting with developers from all sorts of different backgrounds in WordPress and Drupal and even other technologies as well. I'm based out of Champaign, Illinois, so just a couple hours south, and I've been doing Drupal for about 11 years now. The point of the training session today is to learn a little bit about what visual regression is, what the problems are that we're trying to solve with it, and then to learn a little bit about BackstopJS specifically in a way that I am hoping will be really approachable, really easy for someone to pick up and just try on your own site so you can become comfortable with it and then grow up from there. I should also say this has originally, up to this point, been a training, so either a half-day or a full-day training. I've restructured the slides and the format and taken out some of the demos to make it more of a hour-long session format so we can go through it today. However, my slides are available, visual-regression.davidneedham.me, and this is something you could actually go through, probably not live right now, but if you check that out, all of the directions for all of the commands that I'm running are in the slides, all right there. All right, so visual regression testing. The first question, and the question I had when I first heard about visual regression testing, is what is it? Well, if you take the definition of regression, a regression is a return to a former or less developed state. So as we're thinking about visual regression testing, we're trying to run a test to verify that we're not regressing, we're not going backwards in some sort of functionality or design that we've built. Typically this comes up in a few different ways. One of them is just doing updates. Now, if you can overlook the fact that this is a WordPress screenshot, an example, all of these examples are relevant for not just Drupal and WordPress, but any website, any browser. It should all be totally relevant. But when you're doing an update, you don't expect anything to be visually different. You go in, you have a security update, you run it. If it works correctly, it should look exactly the same and work exactly the same way before and after the update. So here's a site, there is an update available, we run the updates, and of course, we want to check out the live site, so we kind of flip through it and we take a look, familiarize ourselves with the live site. We make sure that everything is working before the update, everything looks okay. All right, now here's after the update on our development environment. We're not ready to merge it up to live yet, but let's just check out the site. We click through it. All right, so we scan, and did anyone see the difference between the two? Okay, well if you're like doing this all the time, you might have some tricks up your sleeve. Maybe you put them side by side and run a script so that it'll scroll them side by side, and you can compare visually that way. All right, well you should also probably be thinking about other browsers, other viewpoints, viewports. So, this is desktop. Maybe you also care about mobile. So you want to check that and flip through them. And as you're seeing, this is a problem that we as humans are just not very good at solving. We might be able to catch differences that are very blatant and obvious, but it's really difficult for us to catch subtle differences. And that's why a tool like BackstopJS that will highlight the differences between two screenshots will make our jobs a little bit easier. So here is a BackstopJS report highlighting the differences. Just to show you here, we have this little scrubber, so you can actually move the scrubber back and forth. And you can see in this update, the text on that search box changed. It's a minor detail, but it might be something you want to know about, depending on what's going on. And it's something you wouldn't necessarily expect to happen in a just mundane update that you're doing. So this is one of the things that BackstopJS can catch for you. And it becomes even more useful as you start, again, thinking about multiple browsers, multiple viewports. It's able to account for all of that for you. So visual regression testing is able to help you have superpowers. You're able to leverage computers and robots so that you can notice these things that are different more easily. It should give you more time to focus on the things that you actually care about and really highlight the things that you need to pay attention to. There's a bunch of different visual regression tools out there. We are going to be focusing on BackstopJS, but if you have a different preference, you can do that. There's also lots of third-party paid visual regression services out there that you can pay a little bit of money to, and they'll take care of those for you. We're just going to be working with running Backstop on our computer ourselves and running tests manually at this point. There are lots of benefits to using a visual regression test of any kind. First of all, you're going to be taking these screenshots of two versions of your site, probably your live version and your development version, whether it's up on Pantheon or up on some staging site that you have, or maybe live versus your local copy. Maybe you want to be testing as you're developing a site to make sure that you're only changing things that you expect. So we're able to do that. We're able to put in a reference URL, which is the original, the perfect live version, versus our test URL, which is going to be our development site or our local site. We're also able to accommodate multiple viewports. So if you know that you want this to work on tablet and mobile at these resolutions, under these criteria, you can set up your configuration file to account for that and to generate a report that has each of those instances accounted for. You also have options to scan your entire site. So if you don't want to have to worry about manually adding a report or a scenario for every single page on your site, there are options like Backstop Crawl is a library that will actually use a spider to crawl your site, grab all the URLs, and then generate a report with that. Now, my personal feelings on that so far in using this in the real world has been that it's not actually very useful to scan your site and get every single URL, because the report that you generate takes forever to go through and scan and do that. So still, you might have a use case where that's helpful. And then, yes, you do get error reporting, and it's meant to be relatively easy to write tests, and we'll see whether or not that's true when we get into the code. There are some limits to visual regression testing, though. You might have noticed on that screenshot earlier when we were looking at we were kind of flipping through the GIF and we showed the report. Sometimes there are some visual differences between two versions of a site that are not representative of an actual change that you'd expect. Maybe if you have embedded media, like a YouTube video or a Vimeo video, sometimes they'll embed random static on their loading image, which will give you a failure when it's not necessary. Also, sometimes things will just be slightly off for some reasons that are a little bit difficult, or timing. If you have two versions of a site, one loads faster than the other. There are ways to account for a lot of these things, but there are some limitations that make it a little bit more difficult to use. However, I still find that this whole process saves a lot of time, and it helps you identify the things that are needing to be addressed. All right, so let's actually jump into using BackstopJS. All right, so the way that this works is we are using a headless Chrome. So we're not actually opening up our Chrome browser, and it's not taking screenshots that you can see. You run the command, and it goes through and does it, simulating it with headless Chrome automatically. So you don't have to worry about your windows popping up or anything. You can just use your command line, run the command, and step away or go do other work, and it will take care of all of that for you. You are also able to simulate user interactions, meaning you can actually click on things. You could wait for certain things to happen or certain things to load. You can preload cookies as well to give people basically a logged in instance if you wanted to test if you have a site that's behind a paywall or something. There are ways that you can get around that still using the command line. And then, you get this report that we're going to look at. It's going to pop up in our browser, and we'll be able to use the scrubber and all that stuff. But when you're thinking about automation, you're also able to accommodate a command line interface to this with a pass-fail return. So as you're going through and doing something like a script where maybe you want to automate your updates on your site, you could integrate a visual regression test that returns a pass-fail and then does other things with the script, the larger script that you're writing. Okay, and then you do have the option of either installing BackstopJS on your project itself or globally on your entire computer. In this case, I've opted to do it globally because we'll see that in a minute, but you'll have the option to then just go in and initialize Backstop on every site that you're working on if you'd like to, but we'll see that in a minute. We will also see a demo of the standalone packaged app. So if you have a team that maybe doesn't feel comfortable running the command line a lot, or they don't want to have to manually set up BackstopJS, if you feel comfortable with Node, you could package this up as a Node app, and you run a command, and it does the visual regression test for you all in one sort of packaged, neat bundle. We'll also take a look at that later. All right, and ultimately it comes down to just a few simple commands, and we'll be seeing those. All right, so again, everything is sort of defined in this BackstopJS file. It's a configuration file, and I'm just going to explain some of these pieces before we actually jump in and start editing it. So we start off here at the top with viewports. Viewports are just your dimensions of the website that you want to capture. So we have one here for phone and one for tablet. Maybe you also want to do desktop or whatever other dimensions are relevant for what you're trying to do. Below that, we have a section for scenarios, where we can define different pages on our website and all the criteria for that. So we have a label, which is describing what this particular scenario is. We have the URL, which is the URL that we're testing. So this is going to be our development URL or our local URL. And then the reference URL, which is the live website that we're testing it against. Below that, we have a bunch of other things. So there's like ready, event, and selector. If we want to wait until this thing is on the page before we actually run the test. We can delay the test a certain amount of time if we want to account for maybe a loader or a certain slide or something like that. We do also have options to hide and remove selectors. So for example, if we have that YouTube video that is causing our test to fail every single time, we could either hide that or remove it from the page completely whenever the test is run, so it's not causing our test to fail every single time. And then of course you can do the opposite of that, where instead of, by default here, it's selecting the entire document and scanning, testing the entire document. If you only wanted it to test particular components, or if you are doing like a style guide with a component library that you want to be testing against, you could add specific selectors that it's testing, and it will generate a report selector by selector, which could be helpful sometimes. And then there's all sorts of other configuration in here, including changing the engine and things like that, that we're just not going to have time to get into. All right, so now we're to the first demo, where we are actually going to be running BackstopJS on a project. So I have a site. It is a Pantheon theater website, pantheondemo.com. And this is the live website. It's a common website that we use at Pantheon for a few different demos that we run. So it has a slideshow, it has a few different sections. Pretty easy, only a few different pages. Well, I also have a local copy. I'm using Lando, which isn't really relevant for this, but it's just a local Docker installation. It's an exact copy, and I'm pretty sure it's an exact copy, but of course I can always run a BackstopJS test to make sure that it's an exact copy. So we could get that going. It's going to follow the directions here. So first of all, I need to initialize backstop. So if I jump over to my command line, sorry about that. So if I just do a backstop init, it is going to set up the backstop project on this site. So it's going to give me a backstop.json file, which has some pre-configured stuff in it. It's going to set up the file structure in place, so it has a place to save the screenshots that it's going to be generating, and just generally getting it ready to go. So when I'm ready to start configuring this, getting it specific to my project, I can edit the backstop.json file. So let's take a look at that. Just going to open it up in Atom, which is my preferred code editor. And this is what you get by default. You have phone and tablet for your viewports. If you want to add or remove those, you can do whatever you want. We also have an onReady and onBefore script, which isn't really useful for me in this place. You're just able to kind of set up some stuff in advance. I'm going to leave it there just to show that I don't have to remove anything. But if I was optimizing this for a real-world scenario, I'd probably remove those because I'm not really using it. Below that, I have the first scenario, the BackstopJS homepage. I'm going to swap this out with the Pantheon Demo homepage. I also have the option here for the cookie path, which again I'm not really using for this demo, but I'll leave it in place. We have the URL, which is going to be my demo site, my Lando site. So let me put in the URL for that. Pantheon weekly demo site.lando.site. And then the reference URL, which is going to be my live site, pantheondemo.com. And then I don't really have to change anything else. All of those other variables are there. I can change them if I want to. I can look up the reference and determine what these are. But I'm actually just going to save this just as it is, switch back to my command line, and start with a backstop reference. This is going to generate the initial reference screenshots for the reference site that I referenced. Wow, that's a lot of references. But it's taking the live website, creating screenshots for the different viewports for this homepage. And then once that's done, all I have to do is run a backstop test, just as it says right here, to generate a report. So now it's creating screenshots for my, my test site on my local computer. It's generating a report, comparing them. So we can see here, all these. I expected these to be the same, but as you can see, the reference is actually a little bit faded. It took it a couple milliseconds or so for it not to be, it didn't get loaded completely right away. So I have this, let me just click through the reference or the report real quick and we can take a look and I'll fix this issue. We can take a look at the reference and see the screenshot and kind of see what it looks like. We can jump over to the test, see what that looks like. We can also look at the diff to see everything highlighted that's different between the two. And then we can actually go to the scrubber, and we can see a comparison of the two versions and scrub them back and forth. But let's actually resolve this issue. So the problem is that it's not fully loading before the screenshot's taken, and this is in our reference image. So if we jump back to our code, we have a few different options. I could delay if I wanted to. That might help just by saying let's wait 10 milliseconds, let's wait a full second, something like that. I could also go to the ready selector and grab a class on the page and say like when this is completely loaded, then take the screenshot. I'm going to start just with the delay. I'm going to say let's do 10. Let's go back, and it was in the reference image, so I need to redo my references. So backstop reference. All right, now let's do a backstop test. Oh, it still did it. Okay, so then maybe it would make more sense to grab the one of those classes, something on the page. Let's see if we can find one real quick. So let's go to our live site, look at the code. I mean, let's just grab something really generic like container. Let's go over to the ready selector, container, click save. All right, let's generate some new reference images.
Do you always have to name them reference? Can you put any name you want?
In this case,
You have to name it like the tag.
Well, so the process is you backstop in it to generate the project, and then you just do reference to regenerate the reference images, and then test to compare the live versus the reference. I don't know if you could create like multiple versions, so like you have a reference 1, reference 2, reference whatever. Good question. Backstop tests now. Oh, I think it still failed. Oh, but look, this time it's on the test one. Well, that's strange. Okay, well, right, this is the great thing about live demos. Sometimes it doesn't quite go how you expect. That's okay. You would massage the config file, get it so that they equal the same thing, and who knows the reason why in this case, why they're not. But you could also just ignore the slideshow in this case. If the slideshow is consistently causing errors when it's things that are just like, oh, it's not quite loading right, you could just hide it or remove it from the markup, and it wouldn't have to be included in the test anymore. So this is one example, quickly generating this report here. Typically the process is just like I showed you. You're modifying that config file, you're doing reference and then test. Once your reference is completed and it feels like a good representation, like in this case, we wouldn't have to regenerate the reference every single time. We could just make whatever change we need to, do test again, and until we determine that it's working the way we expect it to. So this brings us to the second killer use case, if you haven't guessed it already, is theming. If you are a front-end developer, or if you make changes on your local computer on a regular basis, and you're tweaking CSS and things like that, then it probably makes sense to have some even very light version of visual regression testing. Because how often have you said, oh, I know exactly what this problem is, I'm just going to make a quick little CSS change, and it's going to totally fix this. And then you realize, like, oh, right, when we built the site, that selector actually was on these other pages, and I forgot, or, oh, right, we didn't, whatever. Whatever the scenario is, that's a really difficult situation to be in, because you think it's really easy, and hours later you're still debugging. Well, let's fix that early and have a test that we can run. We can see exactly what pages are affected and make sure that whatever CSS change we're making is only changing the piece that we're expecting and not accidentally messing stuff up elsewhere. Well, it's easy. So with our specific example, we have this Pantheon theater website, and let's just say our marketing team has determined through A/B testing that if we change the color of that buy tickets button from this purple color to a bright red color, it will sell more tickets. It'll be more noticeable. So we're like, okay, no problem, we can do that, that's easy. Let's jump over to our CSS and we'll make that change, okay? So I'm gonna go back. I think I already have my code editor open. Let's go into my theme. Let's go down to my CSS file, down to this deceptively unspecific class called CTA. We have the background color, purple. Let's change that to red. Save. Let me jump back and just verify on my local that it is working. There we go. So it's now red. So now what we do is we run our test again. So go back to our command line, do backstop test. Now it's going to generate a report for us based on these changes that we've made. Right now, as we can see, again, if you can ignore the top part, which shouldn't be quite that way, you can see pretty easily we have the reference, we have the test, and we can see the difference. So we could go to the scrubber if we wanted to, and actually compare and see, yep, it definitely changed from one to the other. Or we can switch to this version scrubber and see exactly what changed between the two. And then if you combo this with, maybe you have a selection of pages on the website that are high priority. Maybe you also include those as part of your scenario as well. So you would go back to your code, go into your backstop.json file, add an additional scenario here for all of the pages that are important to you to check, and then you would automatically, in this report, not just get different viewports, but you'd also get each scenario listed out one by one. So you can go through and see to make sure that yes, the CTA only affected this one piece. It didn't break things or cause color changes on other parts of the site as well.
Are you saying you have to specify each page in a scenario?
By default, yes.
Okay. It doesn't. There's no like.
So there is there's another library called backstop crawl, that will go through and crawl every page of your website. However, the report that I just ran, the test, was relatively quick because I have 2 viewports in one scenario. As soon as you start adding 3 viewports and 100 scenarios, or even 3 viewports and 10 scenarios, you're having to wait longer and longer for it to work. So you probably want rather than scanning like all 100 pages of your website, you probably want to pick a subset of, here's my template for an article, here's my template for a basic page and a staff bio, and here are the top level navigation pages that I actually want to check, and probably not scan every single page of your site.
Could you use the scan all to generate a template? You can cherry pick pages you want to.
Sure. Yeah, anything you want. Again, another thing I've seen people do is to have like a style guide. That, or like if they built their site using components and they know what all the design pieces are of their site, they could use BackstopJS to pull out each component by class or by ID or whatever, and then have this on this page list out all the things that have changed with each component, with each CSS change you've made. All right, so that's killer use case number 2, theming. As you're going along and building a site, it's easy for you to do this. Of course, it is also easy to automate the process a little bit more. So we're going to be looking at continuous integration for the next piece. We're not going to have time to demo, to show any of these pieces, but just conceptually, let's think a little bit about how we can let robots do the parts of our job that are a little bit tedious, that we're not super great at as humans. So one great example is on cron. Maybe we want to automatically run updates on our site. We don't want to have to think about Drupal updates anymore. We just want them to be automated. And if everything works how we expect it to, just push those up to the live site. We don't want human staff to be in the middle between the next Drupalgeddon and our site. So we can do that. We have a script that we wrote on Pantheon that goes through this continuous integration process. It's a demo script, so take it with a grain of salt, but you can modify it, you can do whatever you want with it. And basically on cron, it goes out, checks for updates on your site. If it detects that there are updates, it will go back to Pantheon, create a branch or a multi-dev environment, a dedicated development environment for this update. It will apply the updates in this safe space. It will then do visual regression testing and behavior testing and a few other types of testing to make sure everything is working after the updates have been applied. If everything passes without any issues, then it will create backups on all of your other environments, your dev, test, and live environments, and then deploy it up to the live site without you having to actually intervene in any way. If you would prefer to have some say in when these updates get applied, or to have a human come in and make sure that it's going to work, you could change this to just say, notify me on Slack when updates are available. Show me links to the test results. Let me look over to make sure everything looks right. And then you could go in and actually click the button to deploy it up to your live site. But this is one example, kind of integrating, automating the process of using visual regression testing so that you're more confident in your updates before clicking the button to apply them. Another great example of automating visual regression testing is on a commit. So we've so far talked, and the demo I showed was I'm running BackstopJS on my computer, and as I'm developing a site or theming it or whatever, I'm testing for myself to make sure that I'm not introducing any problems. Well, we could also introduce a visual regression test on a commit or as part of a pull request that happens automatically on GitHub. So at DrupalCon, we're going to be doing a training called Automated Workflows in Drupal 8 with GitHub, Composer, and Circle CI. And the whole point of this is you should be able to, as a team, working with a Drupal 8 site built with Composer, be able to collaborate with other developers on the team through just creating commits and doing pull requests. So if you are working on some new piece of functionality, you've been committing, you're like, okay, this feature is completed and I'm ready to merge it into the main project, you would create a pull request that would pull all the commits together, present it in front of your lead developer or whomever is doing the review so they can look at all the commits. But if you have automated testing involved in this point as well, then it would actually go in and show you the reports where, it's in this case, we're building the site with Composer and continuous integration, spinning that over to Pantheon as a, this is the completed built version of the site, and then hitting it with all the automated tests and then putting the results of those tests in the pull request. So the lead developer, the person reviewing, doesn't have to manually go through line by line to make sure that everything's working. They don't have to go to the development site to make sure everything's working. All they have to do is review the test results, which could include, again, visual regression testing, but also behavior testing, clicking through and functionality testing, as well as like code review testing. If you have certain standards for code review of like how your code should be on your site, that's another test that you can introduce and make sure it conforms to that before the lead developer has to actually intervene. So again, another way that you can automate this process of using visual regression testing. But again, my whole takeaway, what I'm trying to kind of introduce to you all is that you can run BackstopJS on your computer pretty easily, pretty lightly, pretty quickly too, just getting it set up and run with it. But another example is this standalone Node app. I've ran this as a class a few times, as I mentioned, and occasionally someone is unable to get BackstopJS set up. Occasionally it's because of their operating system or prerequisites or some other reason. For whatever reason it is, it doesn't work on their computer. In that situation though, the standalone app has still worked for them. It has let them kind of interact with Backstop. So this was just, again, a simple example demo that one of my colleagues created to show that this is possible, and it makes the process of running Backstop a little bit easier for people that don't want to have to manually mess with all the bits. So we have an example repo. You can go out and grab it. And again, if we were in a class, I would invite you all to do this, but you can definitely do this after the session today if you'd like to. I've already got this set up. The script that you saw that was loading earlier hadn't quite completed, so this may not work, but we'll give it a try anyway. So we have this visual regression backstop demo. You clone it locally, you get into it, you create a branch so you can make changes without affecting anything else, and then we do an npm install. So let's actually go back and try that again. So this is the part that I was trying to do before the session started, so we wouldn't have to wait for the npm install. But it had timed out, which is a little bit concerning for me. So let me go ahead and describe what this is supposed to be doing. So once it gets installed, it's going to give us an interface for just running our site. For just as like a packaged application, it's going to run BackstopJS on our site and get it all up and generating the report. So it already has that configuration file pre-configured. It's already all the bits are taken care of, and you just run it, and it generates the report. Pretty easy. Let me go ahead and skip since that's still stuck on the one it was stuck on before. So that's one example. You just run it, and it generates the report, and it's done. So you don't have to mess with any configuration at all. And then the next part of that is the multi-site example. So if you have multiple sites that you need to test on a regular basis, maybe your support team is responsible for 10 different sites, just as an example, you could write an npm app or a Node app that has all of those sites preloaded into this standalone npm app, and then when you run the command, it asks you which site you'd like to run the report on. You go down the list, you say go, or you say select it, and then it actually opens it up and runs the report. So you're able to preload all these configurations side by side, click the button, and have the report run. Again, it's intended for people that wouldn't want to have to set this up manually themselves. It just would be able to run standalone. You still do have the options, though, of modifying the configuration file. So if you wanted to download this as a starting point, make changes to it, and still have the standalone app, you could do that as well. All right, and yeah, it's still not working. All right, no problem. We'll just keep on going. So this is running the multiple site example, and hopefully it will work better for you when you try it later. I'll take a look after the class and try to see what the problem might be. But Any questions? Again, I apologize, it's a little bit short because I'm trying to work on the timing, coming down from a half-day class to a session, but yeah, questions?
So in the scenario where you're doing the continuous integration, are you running Backstop inside the container?
Yeah, so in those scenarios where you're running Backstop as part of continuous integration, we are running BackstopJS in Circle CI, in the continuous integration process, against in this case, our Pantheon site, our reference site. So we're creating the site in continuous integration and looking out at the live site, wherever it is.
But is Backstop itself installed inside the container in that case, or is like...
It's installed in the container on continuous integration,
Right.
but it's not installed over on the Pantheon side. Or,
Right,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
So, because where I'm going with this is I've played with this and I got it to work, but when I try to get it to work within a Doxel container, I had this problem where, like, I could point it to like Google.com and it could see Google and it could run. Obviously, I don't want to test Google, but it couldn't see my own Doxel site within the same container. It just kept saying no such site, and I got very stuck. Yeah. Oh well. Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't know much about that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, I don't know.
Okay. No problem.
Yes, sir.
So, what about sites that use like heavy on the parallax or heavy on like the Ajax or things like that? How do you know how long to wait, or are there events that you can look into to say, hey, Ajax is done, or hey, the user has scrolled so far? And then
Right. So those are the sorts of things that you can get into with the advanced and that JavaScript, on load, or where is it?
already.
Well, like at the beginning, there's all this, like on before and on ready JavaScript that you can introduce. There are things you can do in there that I haven't done anything with before. But yeah, that's where you would go to accommodate some of those situations. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So is the idea then, if you change the color of the button, for example, you're introducing something, it's going to flag. Does that mean that you introduce a new reference in your commits if your CI is going to be checking it every time? Is that how you deal with it, or? That's
a good question. So I've spoken to different people of different opinions. Some of them don't actually commit any of the backstop stuff. So they don't commit the images. I mean, in general, putting images in a commit isn't a great idea, but they don't do anything like this backstop stuff. They just run locally on their computer, and that's it. So if you wanted to package it up, save the configuration file, and give that to other people, that probably makes sense. I don't know if it makes sense to send the reference images. Maybe it could, but I haven't seen that in my scenario.
I guess I'm just trying to get a picture of like how, if you're wiring it into Circle CI, and it's like, okay, so I got the Drupal unit tests going, and I've got the NPM tests going, and maybe I'm even doing some shallow rendering in the NPM test.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do I have it tell me, by the way, you introduced a visual regression?
So the way that so all of the demo scripts that we've set up and with the continuous integration process, because the environment's being destroyed and rebuilt every time the continuous integration process fires, it regenerates the reference images and it starts the test from the very beginning. So in those cases, there's a change, to expect that there's going to be an error or a problem, and then you just have to review it. So if you're asking is there a way to flag something as being this is expected, don't give me a red flag for this. I'm not aware of a way to do that, unless you introduce the reference images. That could work. I just haven't done it before.
So you change something in your code that fails a test, and you update the test so it doesn't fail. It would be kind of the same thing. If you're going to use it at that level to have it be a all-time fail type stopper in your CI, or you can just generate the report as a reference to look at somewhere between the CI and the CD part. You should just see it, know that what's in there is expected before you deploy it.
If you have something that has updates on it,
Yes, sir. Question.
When you have a component with dynamic content, like a news feed or an event block or something that you want to visually regress test for regressions, what would be what would be a good approach for handling that?
Yeah, that's really tough. That's one of those areas like the visual regression limitations. It doesn't deal with dynamic content very well because, yeah, if you have a live site that is constantly getting new content, you have your local version that you're not able to update every single, pull the database from every single time, you're going to fail because the content's different in this dynamic block section. In those situations, you can ignore that section. I mean, you're not able to accommodate, all the different things that could happen to that section, but that's what I've done in the past is, ignore this dynamic block because it's always going to be failing.
Unless you're trying to test it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're trying to test it, that's a
It
little
almost seems
tricky.
like you would need to have like a fixture database that you were treating as your production in that instance to compare it against.
Right,
It
well-
sounds like a lot of work.
Well, with the component testing method, yeah, if you have all these components or template type pages available on your live website that are really just used as a style guide, then you could certainly test against that on your local versus the live style guide, and with some assurance that it's going to work the way you expect. Question?
So, since this is has a specific scope, what are the test tools that you use to complement this? What do you think is a good set of complementary tests?
So what are some complementary tests? It depends on the scenario, right? Because with the automated section, continuous integration section, there's behavior testing where people logs into the website and make sure that you're able to create content and you're able to do the various pieces of functionality, things like that. But is that what you're talking about?
What tools would have minimum overlap with this, in terms of testing? Like I'm looking at the general topography of your testing. It's into it.
It's a good question. I'm not sure, actually. With my own development process, it's usually pretty light. Like this is an improvement over what I did before, which was just visually look at it. I don't have like a suite, or I don't have like a very complicated process to be honest. But hey, real quick, does anyone else have any suggestions or ideas about where this could fit into an overall, larger testing process?
My systems run PHP unit tests on the custom code and VHAT tests on dev pods when it spins up, and I definitely can see integrating this as another layer on that. There's, the dev pods, when they spin up for me, they copy production and basically simulate a deploy for whatever I'm doing, but I don't, again, the site's content changes, so I can't say, in my VHAT test, go to this page and make sure the title is this, because the client might go change that title, go change the menu link, so then I gotta update on my VHAT test. So if I can do this and say, make sure my dev site spins up with the same content that's on production, because I just made a copy of it to spin the dev site up, that's where I see myself using this. This is in addition to the VHAT test, which will say, can I log in and create this content, et cetera, and the PHP unit test, let's say, does this function return the expected results? Like, this is another layer that I've been missing, so I'm actually really excited to dig into it.
Yeah, I'd say for React stuff, I often am using Jest and Enzyme for shallow rendering, which basically means I don't get the visual, but I get the markup underlying it. I'll often mock out, here's the JSON response to the page will be built around, and I've even got like a Python script that goes into the Docker. Steven wrote this that goes and pulls out a response from an actual Docker container. It's a mock that I still update my mocks. But what's the pain about that, which this looks like it would be a great compliment to, is when I do find that there is something that changed, I then have to go pull the failed snapshot out and then reformat it and throw it in a diff checker and try to read the markup to see what changed. And that is a real pain. And having something like this to just be able to visually say, here's what changed would be good. But it's pretty easy to commit my snapshot to source control and then have my CI, red flag it if it fails that.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess part of what I'm trying to figure out is like, does this fit in the automated CI testing, or is this something that helps me check the automated CI testing?
We've selected RC for our functional testing, so this is a perfect complement because it could pass those tests and be horribly, but you know.
Yeah.
But I just.
I see this as something I run on dev before I was put to production to just generate a report, don't alternate anything else stopping, but let me see that what's changed is what I'm expecting to have changed, because obviously you're going to change something a lot. Okay.
All right, well, I'll be available. I'll be at the Pantheon booth the rest of the day. Please do leave feedback. It's important, and especially because, like I said, this is newly condensed into session format. There are obviously things that I can fix about it. Please let me know. What are some things I could add or remove or modify to be even better for this? But thank you all very much. So the question was, will this be on the Pantheon site? I don't think it'll be on Pantheon, but it'll be on MidCamp.
I mean the one that you're doing in Seattle.
Oh, the one I'm doing in Seattle is a paid training through DrupalCon, so we're not going to have a recording of that one available.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe after. Okay.
I'm not sure.
Unless I could attend.
I don't know.
I don't think so. That's exactly what I want to do. I came from Seattle.
Can you send me an email?
Yeah, so what I've been doing is sometimes it captions. So I just I saw it. Because I have to go to another room and go to somewhere else. There's only captions in this room and that room and I'm saying it's the first year we're doing it, so we're just kind of testing it out now. And like we didn't find this, so like maybe it'll be hard to because last year sometime in previous I saw some video on YouTube. I was terrible, so I was thinking that all these sessions are recorded. All the sessions are recorded, so the recording is that black box right there. But you're talking about the voice recording. So like the voice and video, like that, all that is recorded. Okay, but that's in every room. Okay. But for this is only like this session is only in these. I got it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I will speak. So computer will not recognize it doesn't. Even when Andrew was speaking, it didn't pick her up very well either. She didn't have an accent.
I have to be very quiet.
So then I have to say how many. What do you do? I will draw
I will. Thank you. It's wonderful.
You're welcome.
I'm going to use this.